All right.
I didn't know you were going to make a presentation.
Oh, yeah, I gotta come up with something. But I'll.
You should have some visual aids.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is Left Bank Books and the Left Bank Books Foundation present James Owen, The Wicked Among Us, Murder, Blackmail, and Book Collecting in the Ozarks. I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. It is really our honor to have you here at our store, attending our events. When you support an event, it makes me very happy as the event coordinator, but also it helps us be able to continue bringing in such incredible authors like James. When you purchase your book here at Left Bank Books, the money goes directly back into the local economy at an incredibly higher rate than when you buy it from a big box store or from that monopoly that is ruining the world. So your purchase of a book from Left Bank Books is much appreciated. It helps us continue to bring in incredible authors. For the true crime fans and for Missouri true crime fans specifically, we do have at the end of the month Rick Tulsky, who is he won the Pulitzer Prize for his journalism, but he's going to be here to talk about Injustice Town, a corrupt city, a wrongly convicted man, and a struggle for freedom. And this is a true crime that happened in Kansas City and is another fascinating true crime look at the wild crimes that happen in Missouri. As someone who was born and raised here, wow, we really don't do crime wrong. Just go all the way. Tonight we are here to welcome Missouri author and podcast host James Owen to discuss his debut true crime, The Wicked Among Us. As we all know, Missouri has truly bizarre, unsolved crimes. Roland Comstock's murder is a tragic mystery. So why would some in the community not want to see it solved? We are here tonight to hear all about this case from a former judge and lawyer, and a little bit more about the book. Atop the Ozark Mountains and in the buckle of the Bible Belt, the murder of an eccentric lawyer reveals a tragic family drama and an examination of a community that would rather see some crimes left unsolved. I will let James tell us more about that, but it is just a wild story. The more I dove into this and the more I dove into the story, I was like, this is everything. It is like how many different wild tangents can be involved in this crime, and they are there, and he wrote about them. So we are going to hear some exciting things tonight. But maybe not who did it, because it's, yeah. So we're not, I haven't read the end of it, so James Owen left the family farm to become a lawyer to some success. In fact, that is where he became involved with the intriguing circumstances that make up The Wicked Among Us. He was appointed a judge and after that worked in state government for a few years. James now runs the nonprofit Renew Missouri, focused on clean energy advocacy. In addition, he writes a film column for the local Gannett newspaper and is the film critic for a local talk radio station. He also hosts two podcasts, Renew Gurus and Film Snobs. Jane lives in Columbia, Missouri with his wife Claire and their two kids, Cecile and Miles, along with an unruly dog named Rosie. Without further ado, would you please help me in welcoming the incredible James Owen.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. Well, good evening, everyone. And good evening to everyone watching online. This is streaming, so I will be addressing the audience here. So don't feel offended if I'm not talking to you. And we're like all friends here. So like I feel like I don't need to be that formal with all of you, but I'm certainly happy to talk about this book. I'm happy to talk about the experiences that went into the story and to talk about the process of the book, as well as what I think it all means. Because I did not ever set out to be a true crime writer. That was not something that I had an ambition to do. That was not something I was interested in doing. I don't even read a lot of true crime. But when I would talk about the story, because it was a story that I had personal involvement in from a perspective of knowing the people in this book, as well as having professional relationships with the people in this book. I would talk about it, and I would kind of hit the highlights of it, and I would have people say, "That's a really crazy story. Somebody should write a book about this." And I kept thinking, yes, somebody should do that. I wonder who would do that. And then I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Because I wanted to make a book. I want to talk this story not just about a crime or murder. Oh, and maybe they're all going to come in. Or maybe they're just shopping and I just made them feel awkward. Oh no, hey, I know you. Hey, hi, thanks for coming. I just started, so you didn't miss anything. And like I said, I know pretty much everyone here, so I'm going to try to be very, informal and low key, but I do have a presentation. So I kind of wanted to not just tell the story about a crime or about an investigation or even a legal case. I wanted to tell the story about a person. I wanted to tell a story about a person that was in a very specific time, in a very specific place, and about what that culture and what that personality meant in terms of, how we should look at the murder, how we should look at the fact it remains unsolved. And so that was important to me to look at this not just as trying to sensationalize a murder, trying to take advantage of a victim, because I know that there is a lot of criticism of the true crime genre, that it does those things. But I really just want to tell the story about Roland Comstock. And who is Roland Comstock? Well, he was a lawyer. He was my boss. I remember when and I think this might be certainly news to some of you, because a lot of you in this room I knew from my second career, my second life as an energy policy advocate. But there was a time when I was just a lawyer in Springfield, Missouri. So we're going to go way back to 2005, if you'll join me, kids, in talking about when I was in the Court of Appeals. I was clerking for the Court of Appeals for a judge that was about ready to retire. He was a judge who had been appointed in 1979 by Joe Teasdale, who was a governor that some of you are like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about Joe Teasdale in a very long time. But he was a one-term governor, and I was working for this judge, and I was wanting to run for office. I was wanting to get involved with politics, which I could not do while I was clerking for a court. So I started looking for a job. Wanted to go practice law because I thought, well, that's one of the reasons why I went to law school, is because I could make money being a lawyer while I pursued politics, while I pursued elective office, because I thought that would be, something that I kind of aspired to and something I was interested in. So instead of going to like a normal law firm, I sent in a resume to a small firm on the north side of town. Some of you are slightly familiar with Springfield. There is a part of Springfield called Commercial Street. They call it Historic C Street there. It was kind of the railroad community in Springfield. It was built around the railroad. And it had fallen into some disrepair for a while, but now it's kind of become gentrified and fancy, and people live there. There's nice French restaurants there. And that might sound familiar to people that might live in St. Louis. That neighborhoods go through something like that. But he had a law firm there, and he had a law firm there since the 1960s. And I just sent this resume in knowing nothing about him, knowing nothing about his practice. And I sent the resume by fax because he didn't use email. And he called me the next day, and he had this very gravelly voice. He was a smoker. He smoked a lot. He drank a lot. He was just like kind of one of those guys, right? And he called me and he's like, I see that you went to school in Lawrence. You went to law school in Lawrence, which I know makes me a big hit. I'm living in Columbia. I'm a KU law grad. He's like, so tell me, who's the most famous author from Lawrence? I was thinking to myself, is this guy asking me this question? Like, what is this? But, I'm kind of like into weird trivia. So I said, I would say it would be Langston Hughes, but he was more of a poet. I don't think he would be considered an author. So I guess I'm going to say William Burroughs, who is a St. Louis native, but retired to Lawrence because I guess he thought that was kind of funny to like just move to the middle of Kansas and just live there with his mugwumps. And I said, I'm going to say William Burroughs because he's a writer. And I did not realize that Roland, being a book collector, not only was a book collector, I'm going to get to more of that in a minute, but was also really big into beat writers like Kerouac, Burroughs, Ginsberg. Like he loved those guys. And all I could hear is like him just taking a drag on a cigarette. He's like, yeah, that's very good. That's a very good answer. And so I think that actually got me the job, but I wasn't really sure what I was getting myself into. So I ended up going to his house. She had this big, gorgeous house. Like, okay, so Springfield, I guess I should talk a little bit about Springfield being like this town. It's about 150,000 people. It's in the Ozarks. It's very conservative. It's very religious. And it's got a lot of like pretty scenery around it. There's a lot of nice natural areas. And he had this huge estate by this lake, by this reservoir that the city of Springfield owned. And it had all these big gates, big fences, just big iron gates. And I didn't know what that was about. And I just saw this beautiful house on this hill. I mean, it was a little dilapidated, but it was really nice. And I pull up and I just see like dead chicken carcasses and like these big chew toys that are just all over the driveway. And I get approached before I go into his house by what appears to be a pack of wolves. Because, as I also learned, he lived with a pack of wolves. These are hybrid wolves. They were very dangerous. They howled. They did all, I mean, they were just kind of wild animals. And I found that when I was talking to him, as he was taking me around his house, that they would bite at my fingers. And so I had to keep my hands in my pockets because I wasn't sure if they were going to like hurt me or cut my fingers or whatever. But he showed me his library because, as I was mentioning about his whole book thing, I learned, was this world-renowned book collector. He had a 3-story library built onto this house. Dead writers at the top, living authors at the bottom. And I saw this amazing space. It had all this ornate woodwork. It had those ladders that move around like you see in movies. It had chandeliers, and this was just like out of a movie. And I was just like, you got to tell me about this collection. And he was talking about how he would spend about $50,000-$60,000 a year going around the world because he would get first edition books. He had been obsessed with books almost for his entire life. And at this point, he's 68, 69 years old. And he said, I used to send them by postage. I would send them to the writer, and I would ask for them to mail them back. And there's a section in the book where he talks about how he had sent a number of books to Anthony Burgess, who is, I think a lot of people know, is the writer of A Clockwork Orange, and never got them back. He would call them. He would go to London and get arrangements to go to book events where Anthony Burgess was there to ask like if he would just give him his books back, sign them, that sort of thing. And then I guess when Anthony Burgess wrote his autobiography, he talked about how book collectors would send him the books with postage, and he'd just throw the books away and keep the postage. And that's what he did. And Roland Comstock said in an essay he wrote, he's like, I will never speak ill of the dead, but I will speak ill of Anthony Burgess because he is too much like myself, is what he said. But that was what he would do. So he started traveling around the world to go get these books because people wouldn't sign them. And so he would get subscriptions to the Washington Post, to the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and he'd see where local bookstores, back when we had newspapers that were functioning, they would have these book signings in advance. He'd call his travel agent back when we had travel agents, and he would go get on a plane and fly to these places, and then he would just get their book signed. He would bring dozens of copies of these things. And believe me, if you want to buy dozens of copies of this, I will sign all of them for you. But that's what he did. That's what he did. He was this voracious book collector. He had opened a bookstore on Commercial Street in Springfield when he was 15. It was called Addison's. It was named after a 16th century British magazine. Eric, do you know that one? You're an English guy, English major.
Before my time.
Okay. But because he was also an Anglophile too. He loved British stuff. On St. Patrick's Day, he would wear orange. Very antagonistic guy. So like when he was living on the north side of Springfield, growing up as a kid, he would buy comic books and he would rent them to other kids in the neighborhood. And if they didn't bring them back, he'd go collect. And he would just collect the money and let them keep them. And so his parents noticed this book collection kept getting larger and larger, so they told him he had to get rid of these books, and so he just rented a space. And so as this 15-year-old, he just had this enormous book. It was really, he'd say it was a bookstore, but it was really just his stuff, right? And so he went to Drury, which was a school that I went to, and a couple of my friends here went to. He would always talk about in the 1950s. He was the only member of the Young Democrats who had a copy of Howl in his book bag. And he went there, and then he taught French for a while in a little town called Mountain Grove, Missouri. And then he went to the University of Kansas City, which is now, it was University of Kansas City, now it's the University of Missouri, Kansas City, where he got his master's in British history, and he taught British history. And he wrote his master's thesis on capital punishment in, I believe, 14th century Britain. It is, I've read that whole master's project, and I tell you, it is a laugh. I actually quote some of it here in the book. Let me see if I can find it. I actually did not save this part. He talked about this story about gruesome thesis on corporal punishment in 14th century Britain. He began with a passage from the 1951 Daphne du Maurier. Never had to say that. Maurier. Thank you. I know they were a very popular writer back in the day. My cousin Rachel, describing an unrefined and violent past. Rowland used this to emphasize how the British viewed reform at the time. They used to hang men in the old days. Not anymore, though. Now, when murderers pay the penalty for his crime, he does so in private after a fair trial at the Assizes. Maybe? I don't know. I've actually never said any of this out loud. I should really work on that, huh? It is better so, like a surgical operation, and the body has a decent burial, though a nameless grave. I can remember as a little lad seeing a fellow hang in chains where the four roads met. The rain had rotted his breeches, if not his body, and strips of worsted drooped from his swollen limbs like paper. Quite an interesting cat, right? But at this point, he was either going to pursue getting his PhD in British history or do something else, and he didn't know what to do because he was very much worried about the fact that he wasn't going to have any money to buy his books. So that's when he decided to go to law school. And so he went to law school at the University of Kansas City, where while he was getting his degree, he taught British history still. So that's how he paid for his tuition, which at the time cost less than the parking that you had to pay for in Kansas City. And while he was doing this, he would still go home to Springfield, and he was doing his taxes for his neighbors. He had this whole thing set up in his garage where he'd do taxes for his neighbors. And he also ran for state representative. When he was in law school in Kansas City, he ran for state representative in 1962. He lost in the primary by a couple of votes. And we have some, oh my gosh. Man, it's like
what's going on?
Ghosts of Christmas past. And he eventually got his law degree. And he came back to Springfield, where he moved his offices into the old bookstore. And because he had learned so much about the tax code, he learned so much about how the IRS worked, that he then said he was going to focus on probate and estate planning, because that was just something that really did have to incorporate an understanding of taxes and try and help people plan their assets and everything else around that. But he was still very much involved and engaged in politics because he believed that was going to help him build his name. He got elected to state representative in 1964 in the blue wave that Lyndon Johnson's election helped facilitate. where he only lasted 2 years. He only lasted one session in the state legislature because he made all the leadership in Springfield mad at him. The Chamber of Commerce would write editorials against him. The mayor would complain to reporters all the time about the meddling he was doing in city affairs. And they kind of just got sick of him, and they ran somebody against him, and he got beat. He would always bemoan the fact that he got beat by someone that was just a goddamn auto mechanic. Because he was very down on that. But he stayed in politics for a little bit, but he mainly focused on his books and the law. And he was doing all this trust work. He was doing all this probate work. And we got to find the story. Because, when you're talking about estate planning, this is kind of where the book gets into all this minutia of what's a will, what's a power of attorney, what's an estate. But we talked a little bit about trusts in this book, and we talked a little bit about what those are. There's a lot of lawyers in this room. I'm sure they know a little bit about what trusts are. But we talk about it a little bit because I want to get into the story because I think this is like really one of my favorite stories in the whole book. There's a trust. Trusts have been around since ancient Rome. If a lawyer like Roland draft a trust, you then have to retitle everything you own into the trust's name. When you die, the person named as trustee takes over and continues handling things until everything can be wound up and assets distributed to the beneficiaries of the trust. The administrator of a trust means everything can be done outside of probate court. It's private and costs less money. The court will not get involved unless there's something tricky afoot, like a trustee with sticky fingers, or when someone wants to leave their earthly belongings to a dog. Butch the bulldog, to be exact. His owners died, and under the terms of the trust, Butch was to live in the house until doggy death, as well as have full use of the owner's Ford van. Plus, the trust directed trustee and family friend Ruby Keene to live with Butch, tend to his needs, and serve as his driver, with a salary for doing so. Butch also was provided an allowance for food. KFC fried chicken was his meal of choice, and whatever else a pooch could want. The nieces and nephews of Butch's dearly departed owner would get the house and the van, but only after Butch got to use them first. They would get the money if any was left. In fact, the trust contained a provision that upon Butch's death, his body was to be examined to make sure the dog had not met his end through nefarious means. None of this sat well with the relatives who had to wait in line behind Butch. They hired a lawyer who urged the court to ignore the provisions of the trust regarding Butch's right to live in the house and have use of the van because this would cause unnecessary depreciation to the assets. The house and the van should be sold, the lawsuit said. The heirs' lawyers argued there was no problem with providing for this 80-pound dog, but letting the property languish until Butch expired was unfair to the relatives. Doing so, the lawyer argued, would border on the ludicrous. Ms. Keene also had a lawyer who said the court had to follow the provisions of the trust with the strictest of compliance. It was a real dispute, but the party who had the most to lose, Butch himself, had no ability to hire his own lawyer. Judge Burrell, and the same Judge Burrell who gifted Roland's wife the gun that probably ended up being used to kill him, but we'll get to that in a minute, decided Butch needed his rights protected. Therefore, the dog required a guardian ad litem, usually reserved for minor children or adults who could not make decisions due to a mental incapacity. Burrell believed Butch needed someone to watch out for his interests, a lawyer who could appreciate that, no matter how absurd, justice should be served. Roland was just such a lawyer. The local media, upon hearing of the controversy, were thrilled. Butch's lawyer, never one to skip free publicity, reciprocated. Roland brought Butch to every court hearing and held press conferences afterwards. Snippets in the Springfield paper got carried over the wires and ended up as a joke in a night show monologue. The military newspaper Stars and Stripes ran one of those, "Can you believe this?" columns about Butch and his lawyer. Roland knew it was good advertising for his law firm, but confessed to Becky he hated the dog. His breath stinks and his farts are nonstop, Roland complained. That goddamn mutt is disgusting. By the conclusion of the investigation, Roland determined there was nothing unusual about granting the use of a home or vehicle to Butch. 3 experts, all retained by Roland at the trust's expense, testified Butch should be allowed to continue with his luxurious lifestyle. Dogs get used to things in their life, the experts maintained, and if those trappings were taken away, the dog would not be as happy as he had been, and it could limit his lifespan. The judge agreed and denied the heir's request. Butch spent the rest of his days sticking his head out the window of his van as he and Miss Keene cruised Kearney Street. He ate buckets of chicken for dinner. Butch watched television from his own chair and slept in a baby crib. Keene was awarded $9,100 for previous care of the dog with a $300 a month salary going forward. When Butch finally passed away in 1992, he was buried next to his owner. His death was marked by a brief mention in the National Enquirer. The house and van were sold and the proceeds split up between the contingent beneficiaries. The autopsy revealed no foul play. I was hoping I was going to get a better laugh, but that's okay. So those are some of the funny stories about Roland Comstock and about his and about like some of his cases, which there's a few more of those like that in the book. But of course, I mean, one of the reasons why I think this book got any kind of attention from a publisher or from an agent is because there is a crime involved and there is a murder involved. And Roland was married to a woman named Alberta Comstock. They got married in 1968, shortly after his political career faltered. She had 4 kids from a previous marriage. She adopted all of them. That would have been Michael Comstock, Faith, Sherry, and Rodman. They had a son together named Stephen. They moved from house to house, depending on if the book collection got too big and he had to find more space. He would actually have the kids living in one bedroom so they would have space for his books. But they started getting a little too old for that, so he had to like start moving into bigger and bigger houses. This was a dysfunctional family to a certain degree. The kids got involved with drugs and alcohol, as tends to do sometimes when you have a little too much money around. And they moved out. They had various careers. Faith Stalker, as she ended up getting married, taking the last name Stalker, she actually ended up becoming a CPA, and she office shared with Roland. They were very close. They were very tight knit, not only professionally but also personally. So she was probably the closest closest relative of all of them. But Alberta and Roland were married for 38 years. Things only kind of went sideways when Alberta discovered in some luggage where Roland had been going to Mexico, where he said he was going to a book convention, that he had a matchbook to a resort that said it was catering to gay clientele. And she confronted him about this, and he admitted that he did not believe he was gay, but just really liked the company of gay men, which probably suggests you might be gay, but I don't know.
A lawyerly answer.
Yeah. It's a very lawyerly answer, that's right. So she files for divorce. She wants him to leave the house. He won't leave the house, so she leaves the house with the wolves, with the books, with everything else there. And they get divorced, but one of the things they leave open is what's going to happen to this house. Anyone who's practiced divorce law knows, or family law knows, that sometimes you get the divorce done, you say, okay, you're going to sell the house and you're going to split the proceeds, and that's how it's going to work. Well, she was convinced that he was never going to sell this house, that he was deliberately keeping it in bad repair because he wasn't going to get rid of his books, wasn't going to get rid of the wolves, and she kind of became obsessed with all of this and fighting him. And whenever he'd miss a check payment, she would file paperwork to say that his law firm and all of his assets should be sold at the courthouse steps. He had to fight all that back. She found photos of him that he had taken at this resort, and she tried to take those to the probate court and to all of his clients around town. None of it really, I think she had some belief it was going to have an impact on his reputation or somehow damage his ability to make money. It didn't. But ultimately, she did have a situation where she was supposed to be receiving assets from another trust, that he was holding on to and that he had not properly been accounting for with the court. And he had been taking money from this particular estate, and she was going to turn him into the bar, and he would have almost certainly gotten disbarred if she had done that. So she ended up blackmailing him with this information, trying to get money out of him or getting the house back. She didn't end up doing that. She had a lawyer that was trying to push that issue with the court. But on the day that the real estate listing expired on the house was the day he was murdered. That was on July 2nd of 2007. The next day, his paralegal, Becky Frakes, who was essentially serving as his assistant in all aspects of his life, found him shot dead in his kitchen. He had gunshot here, 2 in the back. And they never found a gun. They never found any DNA at the scene. The only thing they had at the scene was his copy of Lord of the Flies, which was what he considered his most valuable book that I believe he was using to bargain for his life. And also his ex-wife's briefcase was also there. Oh yeah, spoiler. I know Tori was just showing me that she's still like reading part of it. But this is all, you can look all of this up. But I mean, that ultimately was not enough for the Greene County Sheriff's Department to have enough evidence. Now, there was an investigation. There was a son-in-law that was also a lawyer that was married to Sherry, his adopted daughter, who had a falling out with Roland. They had been partners together and they had a falling out over money. Stop if that sounds familiar. And he would tell anybody who would listen, especially law enforcement, that he believed that Roland was a pedophile. There has never been any evidence of this. There's never been anyone else that's come forward to say this. But I do believe that to some degree that was poisoning the well with law enforcement, who, you know, when you're talking about a conservative area like Springfield, you're talking about macho people working in a law enforcement agency there. And there is this unfortunate canard of equating gay men with pedophiles. I believe that had this detrimental impact on their ability to want to solve this crime. In fact, one of them told Becky Frakes when they were returning a computer to her after they had already examined it that he got what he deserved. And that you had no idea what kind of guy you were working for. And that was very haunting to her. It was very haunting, I think, should be to anybody reasonable that's reading this. But in the end, they did take this to a grand jury. There was no indictment issued there. So there was a civil suit that got filed by Faith in the civil court that said Alberta Comstock was responsible for his death. And that was filed by the law firm I ended up going to after I had worked for Roland's firm. And it was a 3-year, as you know, with litigation, it took 3 years. And we did take it to a jury. And a jury said, she did it. There's a technicality to that story. I'm going to say that, but you're going to learn that one later. Because I think ultimately what all this proves, I got to save some time here for question and answer. All this should prove is that some of these cases are not tidy. These are very messy. That a lot of people in this day and age, especially since the O.J. Simpson case, believe there should be DNA all over the place. There should be microbes and cloth and hair follicles and everything else. But one thing I learned in the research of this book is when someone is shot to death, there's very rarely any kind of physical confrontation. There's very rarely any kind of physical struggle. So there's very rarely any instance where there's going to be DNA left. But it also raises another interesting point to me, because yeah, the wolf thing is funny, it's really strange, and it's really weird. But when you have the sheriff's department investigating all the gay bookstores in Springfield, saying if he hung out there, or investigating all the websites that he went to, and they should have been asking themselves, why didn't the wolf attack this person who killed him? It must have been somebody who knew that house. It must have been somebody who knew those wolves. And they didn't lay a thing on him. Why is that, I wonder? Because there was a lot of talk that he had met some guy online, or that maybe somebody was just robbing the place. But that was all kind of going on in the days after this murder. But it never made any sense to me, because I don't think they would have made it out of there without having left some evidence that they had been there. And so, to me, I think what all of this kind of amounts to is not only just the story about who I think is an interesting, larger than life, almost literary character, but someone who, his life and his death does certainly represent a time and a place. And I think about a conservative area like Springfield, where You could be a prominent lawyer but not be yourself. You could be a prominent lawyer and have to be closeted. You had to be married. You had to have kids. You had to have that Olin Mills portrait behind your desk so your clients knew that, this guy's all right. He literally, his office was literally a block away from the Assemblies of God World Headquarters, which is based in Springfield. I certainly think Springfield has changed a lot in that time, in the 19 years since this happened. I certainly think you can look at political compositions there, but it still remains one of the few towns in the country that overturned a same-sex discrimination ordinance by vote. And that was just in 2015. So do I think that there are cultural factors that have an impact on things like murder investigations? Do I think that can lead to unsolved crimes? Do I think that the people who believed he deserved what he got were the wicked among us? Yes, I do. And so I do, I don't want to disparage where I'm from or where I spent so much of my time. I do think it is a question that we should be asking ourselves when we're reading this and we're thinking about this, and I certainly think you can find that is true with a lot of unsolved crimes all over the state, all over the country. Is there something about the victim? Is there something about the circumstances that make it less motivating for law enforcement to follow? And again, I'm not trying to just be overly critical of law enforcement, but I do believe that they did not have a lot of evidence they did not have a lot of direct, they had no smoking gun, literally. But I do believe that there is a lot of questions that should be accounted for. Not to mention the fact there were a lot of people that might have been involved with this case, involved with this murder, or at least involved with the aiding and abetting of this murder that have never been investigated, have never been talked to, have never been looked into. And they're still around. I don't know what they think of the book. They were given a chance to comment on it. They were given a chance to be interviewed about it, and they declined, which is their right to do. But yeah, it does cause me some worry that there are people that might have been involved with a murder who don't want this case to be talked about anymore. But I do think that it's just too good of a story to tell. So if they try to kill me, it's probably worth it. Oh, my wife's not watching. So I don't know. I think I was only supposed to talk for 40 minutes, which I've kind of done. So to my friends here, all of my friends here, you have any questions for me? Yeah, up front.
Were the books organized in shelves or they're just piled up on the floor?
Oh no, they're shelved. I mean, oh my gosh, he had these shelves handcrafted. They were all like done, by local woods, what do they call that? Carpenters. Crafts? Yeah, okay. It's been a long day, folks. It's been a long week. What?
If you look up on the internet, the part from your Springfield interview,
Yeah.
they show pictures of his bookcases, of his library, and everything.
Yeah. So, so when we were doing some publicity for this book, the Springfield News Leader did a whole thing that not only talked about the book, they also did everything from their archives about all the stories they've done about him, which were largely about the book collection. And then KY3, which is the NBC affiliate in Springfield, they had archival footage in the piece about this, and it shows that. I wonder if it's in the book.
It's in the book.
I have all these. Oh, yeah, here, Mike, let me show you. I really should have there's a picture of the library. Yeah.
That's why I did so much space.
And there's actually, and then I think you see with the Missouri Library World, see that too. There's the walls. They would tear the hell out of those cloth roofs that some of those older cars like Crown Dixie.
They're called Landau covers.
Oh, is that what they're called?
Yeah, where you had the vinyl.
That's much better than me just saying like the cloth roof
I'm
on a
older,
car.
I know these things.
Okay, well I
Actually had one.
my mother-in-law, who I need to be adding to my research.
Oh.
Andrew.
How did you obtain some of these details about like the circumstances of their divorce or some of the intimate like family details there?
That's a good question because a lot of people have been like, this is a lot of how do you know conversations he had with his ex-wife during this divorce? the estate, which was ran by Becky Frakes, his paralegal, she had all of these files that he kept, personal files he kept, where he would document and outline letters and memos that he would write to his lawyer, write to her, write to his kids. And he would talk about, like, Alberta said this, Alberta said that. I don't know what I'm doing. She's going to drive me crazy. It would have all that stuff in there. So I was able to quote some of that. And a lot of those quotes, maybe from her, came from his rendition. Which is fine. She's gone too. She passed away in 2013, so didn't have a chance to ask her any questions about any of this. But that's where I got some of that. The stuff about the investigation, I have the sheriff's file. That was part of the civil case. They gave that information to the civil lawyers, and my Miss Stalker gave me permission to use that. So there's a lot of details from the investigation that were not public before this book. But in terms of his personal life, he did have a lot of. He did write down everything. And he also kept scrapbooks of everything. So almost every time he was mentioned in the newspaper, or anytime he was mentioned in the National Enquirer, like anytime Butch was mentioned, as an example, he had all of that. And it was really great just having it like in boxes in my house. But that's how I got all that, because it was pretty incredible just being able to get that insight into him. Kirk?
Was there anyone other than the ex-wife who could have gotten past the wolves and had anything close to a motive?
Oh, sure. So, because if you talk to Becky, who probably went to that house more than anybody as his paralegal and as this woman who was running all of his business affairs, like all of his, she never got comfortable with them. They never got comfortable with her. Faith, who went out there a lot, never got comfortable with them. Theoretically, the two sons, Stephen and Michael, Stephen being the biological son of Roland and Michael being the adopted son, they lived around the corner. Michael had kind of a falling out with Roland because he wouldn't quit drugs, so he got his allowance cut off. I don't think they were. I mean, I've never really got to ask him, but I've always heard that they weren't necessarily comfortable with him. Stephen was comfortable around the wolves. However, Stephen has as good of an alibi as anybody because he just went to court-ordered rehab the day before this happened. He was in a rehab clinic in Clinton, Missouri, about an hour and a half away. I know. We know people from Clinton. He talked to me. And he made the observation that he believed it would have been someone who knew he was going to be gone because he was always at the house. He lived literally around the corner in some little cottages, old fishing cottages that Roland owned that were by McDaniel Lake. And he believes that somebody must have known he wasn't going to be there. But do I think Michael could have been familiar enough with them? And I do believe it is possible, and I kind of talk about this a little bit in the book, that Michael could have been there. I think Michael could have been waiting outside. I think he certainly could have been helping Alberta with this because he was also mad about being cut off financially. I do believe he had a motive as well. He also knew that Roland had a big coffee can of cash that he kept in his bar. And Becky and Faith told the investigators about that, and they found that, and it was empty. So it's the people who had been working as researchers in his library the Friday before the murder, they told investigators that he pulled out money there and there was still a lot of money in there. So they believe that somebody took that money. So somebody knew that was there too. Tori.
Now that you have compiled all the information into a book, do you think that there's any opportunity or interest for investigators to look into the case again?
Yeah, I do. I don't. I mean, obviously, Alberta is out of the picture. But I do believe that, as an example, the son-in-law, Al Rose. There is an example in the book where when the investigators went down to Fairfield, Oklahoma, to interview Alberta, they found a FedEx package that had been sent that day from Al Rose to her with keys in it. There is an interview in the sheriff's file where a gas station owner manager outside of Springfield on Interstate 44, which goes through there, and was not very far from Roland's house. They saw what looked like a truck that matched Alberta's description being left there the night of the 2nd. They weren't really quite sure the night, but I believe her car had trouble, and I think it broke down. And I think that Al, her son-in-law, helped her get out of town. And they had never asked him about the investigators had never asked him about that. If you were to ask me, has the statute of limitations passed on aiding and abetting a murder? I think, and maybe lawyers who know this better than me could tell me, I think any case involving a murder still like has the same statute of limitations as a murder, which is, there is no statute of limitations on that. So he could still be asked about that. But in the end, I mean, I don't know if that proves anything. He, who knows? Michael, and the thing about Michael, because in this, and I get into the book on this quite a bit, there were a lot of people who came forward to say that they had heard Michael bragging about killing his dad. There are people that said they saw him covered in blood that night. There are people who saw him coming home out of breath, saying he had just ridden his bike from his dad's house. But the problem with all those people were, and the problem you have when you are a drug addict and a drug distributor, is all your friends are drug addicts and distributors, and they all have criminal charges pending. And I believe they were trying to use their relationship with him to get a plea deal on their cases. And that's what the sheriff's department thought too, and I think they were accurate with that. Now, there is a woman that he was living with at the time that said, and she does not have a criminal record. She says that at the night of that murder, he came home drenched in sweat and said he had blood on his shirt. He said he got into a fight at a place called Sassy Reds. Anybody know Sassy Reds that knows Springfield? That's a strip club on the north side of town, really rough. And he said, like, oh, hey, can you throw away these clothes? And she did. And it only took her 2 years to come back and say that she remembered all of this. But, by then the clothes were long gone. So you asked a question, I gave you kind of a long answer. Do I think they could reopen this? I think there are a lot of unanswered questions that went along with this investigation, but I don't know how it really, I don't know how it would really fit into like coming with a conclusive criminal answer for who did this. Yes.
What was it like working for this guy?
It was a nightmare. And let me tell you why. Because here's the thing. I was, again, fresh out of being a law clerk for a judge, which you don't learn anything about the law being an appellate clerk. You read briefs, you write opinions, and you kind of get a sense of like case law, but you don't know how to like talk to a client. You don't know how to go to court. You don't know how to fix a traffic ticket. I should be talking, shouldn't I? I know I'm very loud. I know you called Mary, but there's allegedly people online. I wanted to learn how to be a lawyer. I mean, why not? I went to law school. I should do something with it. But he was so busy dealing with this situation because so I started working for him in early 2006, like 20 years ago, almost. And he was dealing with all of this blackmail, all of these fights, all of this legal stuff. He never came into the office. They had no money. I was being expected to bring in money for the law firm. No one wanted to hire me. They went there because they knew who he was. He'd been a lawyer for some of these people for, at that point was at like 30 some odd years. Who was I? I was just some 28-year-old idiot that he just hired. And so the business suffered. I was suffering because I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't learning anything. Becky Frakes, the paralegal there, who ended up becoming my paralegal at this other firm, well, she taught me pretty much everything I know, which is not how that's supposed to work. But every once in a while we go have lunch and we talk about movies. And that was kind of fun. But it became very... And I was running for office while all this was going on too. I was running for state representative down in Springfield and lost that election. And then I was kind of like, I lost that election, but now I'm gonna like focus on being a lawyer. And I realized like we were out of money. It was gonna go downhill fast, and I just had to leave. It's too bad because I think he is a very interesting guy, and I would have liked to have learned from him because I think he knew this type of law as well as anybody in that area, maybe even the state. But yeah, it was pretty bad. Yeah, Amy.
Did all the books get sold, or do you know where they got distributed, or?
Some of them got donated to Drury University because he left that in his trust. So they were going to get some of them, and I don't think they kept them. I don't know what they did with them. The others got sold at Christie's.
Okay.
And I actually have been communicating with a bookstore owner in Houston, Texas, who says he bought most of them, and he's got them at his bookstore in Houston. We had been talking about me going down there to speak, but haven't figured out who's going to pay for it. Not my publisher, probably. Deb, if you're listening, I'm just kidding. I know you're not paying for any of this, but you know, but he is very interested in this, and he's wanting to like get other book collectors kind of interested in this because there's still a fair amount of book collectors out there who still talk about this case and still talk about him. Because he was just, again, one of these people. I mean, he got like a lot of his notoriety. I was kind of in the 90s and early 2000s when he really became known as a book guy. But that's where most of it went. It either got donated to his own college or it got sold at auction. And I think a lot of it's in Houston, Texas, from what I can tell. Again, the Lord of the Flies is still in a evidence locker at the Greene County Sheriff's.
Wow.
Yeah, his book he claims is most valuable because William Golding, the writer of Lord of the Flies, hates that book apparently, and wouldn't sign it for anybody. He claimed to Roland that it was the only book he ever signed of Lord of the Flies. I don't know if that's true, but that's what Roland would tell people, and that's why he believed it was his most valuable book in his collection.
So how long does stuff have to stay in an evidence locker?
Till the case is closed.
I would think, well, isn't the case closed?
Well, Kathy,
I thought they said.
I contacted the Greene County Sheriff's Department and asked them to make someone available to talk about it. Because there are still people that are in the book that still work there. And I want to talk to them in an official capacity on the record. And very politely, they explained to me, he's like, we don't comment on open cases. So we can't help you with your book.
Oh.
So, but I can tell you from my experience briefly as a judge, is that when a case is over and no one will claim that evidence, a judge will often sign a document that says they should all be destroyed. I hope that's not what happens to this book, but it could if someone hasn't thought about it for 20 years, 19 years. So,
Well, shouldn't it belong in the trust?
yeah, but it's considered evidence because it was there at the crime scene. It was the only book that was left out. I mean, and you know, when they first looked at the scene, they didn't even collect it because they just, you know, they were like, oh, look, a book guy, he's got a book out, right? You know, but then Becky, when she went through the book, she's like, that book is the only book he really cared about. There's no reason that should be on the kitchen table. And I think I mean, I don't know if I've said this already, but I think he was trying to bargain for his life with that book. I think he's probably like, go sell this. It's very valuable. Please get out of my house and don't kill me. Which also begged a question that my wife asked me when she got done reading the book. Why didn't he just sell some of these books to pay his wife off? But I had actually asked that question, and I think that the idea that he would part with any of that collection to like give her money was just unfathomable to him. And then there's a whole thing about her coming up there that day that the real estate listing expired, that day that she fired her lawyers from her federal case that she had filed against them because I think she was running out of money. She was desperate. She was mad. She was living in this little house in this little town. And her husband, who had made a fool out of her, which is what she couldn't stop telling people, he's living in that big house, that house that I helped him build. And, you know, this is in the book, but you know, she stopped at a gun store at the Missouri-Oklahoma border that night and said, I need to buy a cheap 38. I've lost my gun. I need to go do target practice over there. She pointed towards the Missouri border. And he sold her a gun. But I believe that she went and bought that gun because this gun that I referenced earlier in the book was that gun that was given to her by this judge. She had that gun with her all the time. And she knew that night she was going to get rid of it. And she wanted to make sure she had a gun with her. And so she bought that gun because she knew she wasn't going to have one when she came back.
We do have a question from the virtual
Oh,
audience, but
sorry.
I apologize if it has already been asked because I did have.
Oh,
to
no,
step
no,
away
no.
for a
I'll
second.
answer it again.
You may have already. But Elegant Brides is asking, were any of his adoptive children involved in the writing of the book?
Yes, Faith and Stephen both cooperated with me and sat down with multiple interviews. Sherry Rose, Al's wife, not interested. Rodman Comstock, who had been disinherited by his dad in the early 90s, he died in 2020. He had been in prison before that for attempting to murder his stepson. So he was largely unavailable during this because he had been charged with attempted murder in 2013 when I started working on this. Got sent to prison, got released during COVID, went to live with Al and Sherry, and then just drank himself to death because he was a pretty serious alcoholic. So Rodman, I didn't get to talk to him. But Rodman didn't have much to say. He didn't have any relationship with them, and he was ruled out as a suspect very early on. He just didn't have a relationship with his dad or his mom, really. Although there's a funny story in the book about how when Rodman came to him, like back in the early 2000s, asking for money, and Roland sends us a scathing letter, and it's this whole story from the book about like why he disinherited Rodman. But he's like, I don't owe you a cent. You cost me a bunch of money. You're no good to me. You want to ask for money, go ask your mom. And then he ends it by saying, love your dad. Which I thought was like, maybe he wasn't, there's a lot of love in that letter. So, yeah. So Stephen and Faith didn't talk to me. No, it's a good question. Yeah, Michael did not want to talk to me. Probably smart on his part.
Are we ready to sign some books?
Yeah.
All right. Let's give another giant round.
Thank you. This is really fun. Even if I know all of you. This was great. That actually makes it better. So,
All right.